time for another Christmas story. And today our story is titled The First Christmas Roses. The sun had dropped below the western hills of Judea, and the stillness of night had covered the earth. The heavens were illumined only by numberless stars, which shone the brighter for the darkness of the sky. No sound was heard but the occasional howl of a jackal or the bleat of a lamb in the sheepfold. Inside a tent on the hillside slept the shepherd Berkah and his daughter Madeline. The little girl lay restless, sleeping, waking, dreaming, until at last she roused herself and looked around her. "Father," she whispered, "oh, my father, awake! I fear for the sheep." The shepherd turned himself and reached for his staff. "What nearest thou, daughter? The dogs are asleep. Hast thou been burdened by an evil dream?" "Nay, but father," she answered, "seest thou not the light? Hearest thou not the voice?" Berkah gathered his mantle about him, rose, looked over the hills toward Bethlehem, and listened. The olive trees on yonder slope were casting their shadows in a marvelous light, unlike daybreak or sunset, or even the light of the moon. By the campfire below on the hillside, the shepherds on watch were rousing themselves. Berkah waited and wondered, while Madeline clung to his side. Suddenly a sound rang out in the stillness, and Madeline pressed closer still. "It is the voice of an angel, my daughter. What it means I know not." "Neither understand I this light," Berkah said, and he fell on his knees and prayed. "Fear not, for behold, I bring you good tidings of great joy, which shall be to all people. For unto you is born this day in the city of David a Savior, which is Christ the Lord. And this shall be a sign unto you. You shall find the babe wrapped in swaddling clothes, lying in a manger." The voice of the angel died away, and the air was filled with music. Berkah raised Madeline to her feet. "Ah, daughter," he said, "it is the wonder night so long expected. To us hath it been given to see the sign. It is the Messiah who has come, the Messiah, whose name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. He it is who shall reign on the throne of David. He it is who shall redeem Israel." Slowly up the hillside toiled the shepherds to the tent of Berkah, their chief, who rose to greet them eagerly. "What think you of the wonder night and of the sign?" he queried. "Are we not above all others honored, and thus to learn of the Messiah's coming?" "Yea, and Berkah," replied the spokesman Simon, "believest thou not that we should worship the infant king? Let us go now to Bethlehem and see this thing which has come to pass." A murmur of protest came from the edge of the circle, and one or two turned impatiently away, whispering of duty towards flocks and the folly of searching for a newborn baby in the city of Bethlehem. Hard-headed, practical men these were, whose hearts had not been touched by the vision or the song. The others, however, turned expectantly toward Berkah, awaiting his decision. "Truly," said Jude, "the angel of the Lord hath given us the sign in order that we might go worship him. How can we then do otherwise? We shall find him, as we have heard, lying in a manger. So let's not tarry, but let us gather our choicest treasures to lay at his feet and set out without delay across the hills toward Bethlehem." "Oh, my father," whispered Madeline, "permit me to go with thee." Berkah did not hear her, but turned and bade the other men gather their gifts together. "I too, father?" asked Madeline. Still Berkah said nothing. Madeline slipped back into the tent, and throwing her arms around Melampo, her sheepdog, whispered in his ear. Soon the shepherds returned with their gifts, simple treasures though they were: a pair of doves, a fine wool blanket, some eggs, some honey, some late autumn fruits. Berkah had searched for the finest of his flock, a snow-white lamb. Across the hills toward Bethlehem in the quiet, starlit night they journeyed. As they moved silently along, The snow beneath their feet changed to grass and flowers, and the icicles which had dropped from the trees covered their pathway like the stars in the Milky Way. Following at a distance, yet close enough to see them, came Madelon and Melampo at her heels. Over the hills they traveled, or until Madelon lost sight of their own hillside. Farther and farther the shepherds went until they passed David's well and entered the city. Barachal led the way. "How shall we know?" whispered Simon, and the others answered, "Hush, we must await the sign." When at last they had compassed the crescent of Bethlehem's hills, they halted by an open doorway at a signal from their leader. "The manger," they joyfully murmured, "the manger! We have found the newborn king." One by one the shepherds entered. One by one they fell on their knees. Away in the shadow stood the little girl, her hand on Melampo's head. In wonder she gazed while the shepherds presented their gifts, and were each permitted to hold for a moment the newborn Savior. Melampo, the sheepdog, crouched on the ground as if he too, like the ox and the ass within, would worship the child. Madelon turned toward the darkness weeping. Then lifting her face to heaven, she prayed that God would bless mother and baby. Melampo moved closer to her, dumbly offering his companionship, and raising his head, seemed to join in her petition. Once more she looked at the worshipping circle. "Alas," she grieved, "no gift have I for the infant Savior. Would that I had but a flower to place in his hand." Suddenly Melampo stirred by her side, and she turned again from the manger. She saw before her an angel, the light from whose face illuminated the darkness, and whose look of tenderness rested on her tear-stained eyes. "Why grievest thou, maiden?" asked the angel. "That I come empty-handed to the cradle of the Savior, that I have no gift to greet him with," she murmured. "The gift of thine heart is the best of all," answered the angel. "But that thou mayest carry something to the manger, see, I will strike with my staff upon the ground." Wonderingly, Madelon waited. From the dry earth where the angel's staff had touched sprang fair white roses. Timidly she reached out her hand toward the nearest ones. In the light of the angel's smile, she gathered them until her arms were filled with flowers. Again she turned toward the manger and quietly slipped up to the circle of kneeling shepherds. Closer she crept to the child, longing yet fearing to offer her gift. "How shall I know," she pondered, "whether he will receive my gift as his own?" Barachal gazed in amazement as Madelon and the roses which she held came near to the child. How came his child there, and his child whom he knew he had left safe on the hillside? And whence had come such flowers? Truly this was a wonder night. Step by step she neared the manger, knelt, and placed a rose in the baby's hand. As the shepherds watched in silence, Mary bent over her child, and Madelon waited for a sign. "Will he accept them?" she questioned. "How, oh how shall I know?" As she prayed in humble silence, the baby's eyes opened slowly, and over his face spread a smile. And that's the end of the first Christmas roses. Thank you for joining me for this Christmas story, and I'll see you next time for another one. Have a good day.